Hello and welcome back to our Epic Next.js course. We are continuing building out our Summaries AI Next.js app. And in today's video, we're going to structure our summary data in Strapi so we could save our summaries that we create with OpenAI to Strapi. In the previous video, we got our form working here where you're able to add a YouTube URL and it's going to generate the summary. But now we want to go ahead and save that summary to Strapi. You could always check out this complimentary article that will be in the description below to find the code snippets or the outline of what we are covering. So we're going to jump right into our Strapi dashboard and we're going to start building out our collection type. So let's go into the content type builder and we're going to create a new collection type and we're going to call it summary and click continue. We're going to create 4 fields. The first field is going to be video ID. So we're going to use text. I'm going to call it video ID. Let's click add another field. Again, it's going to be text and we're going to call it title. Let's click add another field. We're going to select our rich text editor, but we're going to use the markdown field and I'm going to call this summary. And finally add another field and we're going to select the relationship field. We're going to keep the name as user. We're going to click on user's permission. And again, just make sure this is user. And we're going to select user has many summaries. Perfect. And let's go ahead and click finish and save. Now that we have our summary collection type, let's navigate to settings under user's permission, roles. Let's go to authenticated and we're going to select our summary collection type. And we're going to select all. We want the ability to create, find, update, delete, and find one. Click save. Now that we have our collection type, let's go ahead and create a service that will allow us to save our summary to our Strapi application. Inside of our Next.js application in VS Code, let's go ahead and navigate to source, data, and under actions. We're going to create a new file and we're going to call it summary actions.ts. In the complimentary blog post associated with this tutorial, you will find this code snippet. Go ahead and copy it. This way, you don't have to watch me painfully type this stuff out. And back in VS Code, let's go ahead and add it in. What we're doing here, we're number one, checking to see if the user is logged in and authorized, and we have the token. Then we're using our mutate data function that we created in previous posts. If you take a look at it, it's just a wrapper function that makes a fetch request to our Strapi endpoint that allows us to add our data. And here we're passing post. So this will create. If we wanted to use this as update, we would say put. But this will allow us to add our summary to our Strapi backend. And back in our create summary action, after we get our data returned from our mutate data function, we go ahead and redirect to the appropriate page using Next.js redirect imported from next/navigation. And you can read more about it at Next.js documentation to learn more on how to use it. But basically, after our successful response, we're going to go ahead and redirect our user to the summary detail page that we're going to create in just a bit. So now that we have this action, let's navigate back to our form. So under source, components, forms, we're going to go to our summary form. And let's import this action so we could use it. So importing our create summary action. Now let's scroll down to our handle form submit. Here we're returning our summary. So now we're going to write the logic to take the summary text that we get as a response from OpenAI, and let's call our create summary action and pass the data. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to construct the payload that we want to send. We want to create a title. We want to pass the video ID, and we want to pass our summary response data. And this is coming from our app API summarize route handler. Notice that we could see our data response here, and that contains our summary. So back in our summary form, once we get that response from our route handler, we're going to go ahead and add it to our payload that we're going to pass to our create summary action. So let's do a try and catch block, and it's gonna await our create summary action, passing the payload. Then if something happens, we're going to handle that error. So first we're gonna use our toast. We're gonna say toast.error equals fail to create our summary. Next, we're gonna set our error state, and we're gonna say, let's destruct our initial state from our previous form. And it's gonna go ahead, set it in our error. So not only are we going to see the toast, we're also going to see this message displayed in the input of our form. So if we scroll down here, you could take a look here that in our input placeholder, if there's an error, we show that error message visually. So back in our handle form submit, we're gonna set loading as false and return out of this catch error block. Otherwise, we're just gonna say toast.success and show summary created message and set loading to false. So now let's go ahead and test it out and see if it works. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste the URL, click create summary, and let the magic happen. Once our summary is created, we are redirected to the page that does not exist yet, but that's okay. Let's go back to our Strapi dashboard here, look on the content manager, go into summary, and notice that we do have our summary. We're currently not setting our user. We're going to handle that in a little bit, but at least you could see that our summary was generated. So our next step is let's go ahead and display it in our Strapi application. And as a quick review, when we submit the form, it fires our handle form submit function. We go ahead and get our video ID, which we're passing to our generate summary service that will go ahead and get our summary for us. Then we're taking that summary and we're passing it to our create summary action. If you take a look at the action, we are posting the data to our Strapi application and redirecting to our dashboard summaries detailed page. So let's go ahead and create it now. In the code editor, let's navigate to our app dashboard folder. And inside dashboard, we're going to create a new folder called summaries. Inside summaries folder, create a new file called page.tsx. And taking a look at our supplementary blog post, you will find the code snippet for our component. So let's go ahead and copy it and let's paste this code inside the page.tsx file. We are yet to create this get summary loader that we're going to do in just a moment, but basically here we have our card component and then we have our summaries route component, which basically will take our data that we get from our summaries and it will map through all the items and render the link card component that we have here to display our data. Now that we have our component, let's go ahead and create our get summaries data loader. So inside our folder, under data, let's navigate to loaders. And inside our loaders folder, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our get auth token because we want to make sure that we're making an authorized request to get the summaries. Next, we need to update our fetch data function here. If you could see here right now, we're not checking for our auth token. So we want to update it in order to take that into account. Let's go ahead and use our get auth token. Then we're going to set our header to include with our bearer token. And finally, here on line 20, if there is a token, use the header that is utilizing the auth token. If there isn't one, just pass an empty object. That means that's an authenticated request, so don't worry about it. Now let's go ahead to the bottom and we're going to create a new function called get summaries. And what we're doing is we're making a fetch request to the Strapi endpoint that is responsible serving our summaries. Now, one thing you're going to notice if we take a look at our app, it's going to look broken. And I'll show you why in just a second. And it has to do with us updating the fetch data here to expect authenticated requests. So if you're taking a look at your code here, you might have an error saying, hey, we can't get the data from header anymore. Because our fetch data is currently passing a JWT token, we need to update within our content manager, going under settings, under roles, authenticated. For our global, we want to say find And same thing for our homepage, say find, because now that this is an authenticated request, we want to make sure that we enable those two routes. So now if you save, go back and refresh, now everything is fine. Now that we have created this summaries page in our app, if you navigate to summaries, you should see this card view. Now that we are showing our summaries, let's go ahead and work on the single detail page, because currently if I click on it, we get this not found page. So let's go ahead and fix it. We're gonna create a dynamic route to allow us to generate the single detail page for our summary. You could check out the docs here to see the convention or how to do it. But basically, we're going to create a folder with the name between the brackets, and whatever the name that we enter here is going to be the parameters that we're going to use. So in our case, it's going to be video ID. So back in the front end of our application, let's, under our summaries folder, create a new folder. It's going to go between the brackets, and we're going to name it video ID. And inside here, we're going to create a new file called layout.tsx. In the complementary blog post, you're going to find this code snippet for our layout component. So let's go ahead, copy it, and paste it in our front end. Here we have just a basic grid. On the left, we're going to show our detailed information, and on the right, we will add our video player. Now, inside the same video ID folder here, create a new file called page.tsx. This is where our summary is going to live. And from our article, go ahead and copy this following snippet for our page.tsx file. Go ahead and paste it in. And finally, now in our front end, you should see our placeholder. Here we have our summaries where we could see the ID that we're getting from our params from our URL here. So if I say 5, it's going to go ahead and get the ID of 5. And this is what we're going to use to fetch our data. So let's go ahead and create a loader that's going to be responsible for getting our data. So find the code snippet for get summaries by ID. Go ahead and copy it. And inside of our loaders, let's go ahead, scroll to the bottom and paste it here below. And again, nothing new here. We're just making a fetch request to our Strapi endpoint to get our data. And before hooking up all the logic, we are going to use React Player to display our videos. So go ahead and let's install it in our project. So here in the front end of my project, I'm going to do yarn add our React Player. Once everything installed, we're going to use it in our component. If you take out our post and scroll down, you're going to see the code snippet where we are utilizing our player. So you don't have to create it yourself. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we're going to navigate to our components folder, custom, create a new file called YouTube player.tsx, and go ahead, paste in that code. And basically, we are importing React Player using the YouTube version. We have a helper function that's going to take the ID and regenerate the URL that our player requires. And if you take a look here, we're using our player, we're passing a video URL and setting some basic styling. Now that we have our player, under summaries, video ID, back at layout. So now before adding our video player, let's go ahead and import our get summaries by ID loader. Next, right above the return statement here, let's use our get summary by ID to fetch our summaries. Once we have the data, let's do a check to see if we have any items. And if there's no items found, we could return no items found. And finally, if we do have items, let's go ahead and get the video ID so we could utilize it in our YouTube player. Here on the top, let's go ahead and import it. And now let's go ahead and use it here in our code. We're going to say YouTube player, passing the video ID. And now let's take a look at our application. So even though we're getting our YouTube video player, we have this error. Hydration failed because the initial UI does not match what's returned from our server. You could take a look at the documentation why this is caused. Sometimes when using third-party client-side components, you might run into this issue. I'm going to share this additional article that I found on dev.to that kind of explains some of the reasons why we have this issue. But to fix this, we would use dynamic import from Next.js. So you could take a look at the documentation where It talks about how to fix content that does not match server rendered HTML. And we're going to go with solution number 2 here, which is disabling SSR on specific components. So what we're going to do, we're going to import this dynamic import function. So let's go ahead and add it in our tab. And next, we're going to go ahead and re-import the YouTube player using the dynamic import. And finally, we want to pass a flag here that says SSR is false. And let's remove this alt import. And now let's refresh our application. And notice that we're no longer getting that error, which is pretty cool. So now before completing the single detail page here, let's go ahead and see what happens if we pass a different ID that doesn't exist. We get this not found, which is okay. If you take a look in the code, we're returning not found. But what we could do, we could actually return an actual not found page. We looked in the past how to do this already. If we take a look in the root of our app folder, we have this not found page. Let's go ahead and just copy this. You could adjust the template to whatever you want eventually, but I just want to show you how quickly this works. So now I want to have a designated not found page inside our summaries. So inside summaries, I'm going to create a new file and we're going to call it notfound.tsx. And we're going to go ahead and import our not found code. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to adjust this. I'm going to say summary not found. And here we're going to redirect to dashboard summaries. And we're going to say here, go back to all summaries. Fantastic. And now if we take a look under video ID in our layout, instead of returning no items found, we could trigger not found using not found function from Next navigation. And it is imported from Next navigation, and you could learn more about it at Next documentation. So let's try that again. We're going to go ahead and add some weird ID for a summary that doesn't exist. And notice now we have our custom not found page, and we could click go back. It's going to take us back to summaries, which is pretty awesome. And I know I say that a lot. So finally, let's finish up our single detail page view. Ooh, this video is getting long, but we are at the final stretch, so we could do this. Let's go ahead and use our complimentary article here to help us out. So we're going to create a new form called summary card form.tsx. So inside VS Code, let's navigate to our components under forms, and let's create a new file called summary card form.tsx. And let's go ahead and copy this code here from our blog post. And before walking through the code, we just need to create this delete button. So go ahead under components, custom, create a new file. We're going to call it delete button.tsx. And in our code article that is in the link in the description below, you could go ahead, find the code for the delete button.tsx, go ahead and copy it. And let's go ahead, paste it. And let's go back to our form. And if it's still complaining, go ahead and try to re-import it again by saying components, custom, delete button, and it should stop complaining. Now that we have this form, let's do a quick review. All it is a ShadCN UI card component. It has an input area, it has a text area, has a submit button to handle updating summaries, and then we also have a delete button to delete summaries. The logic has not been implemented. We're going to cover that in the next video by creating our update summary action and delete summary action. But for now, we just want to use this form to display our content. Let's navigate to our app folder under dashboard, back at summaries, video ID folder, go into our page folder, and let's first go ahead and import our summary card form. Now let's go ahead and call our get summary by ID loader. And inside summary card route, right before the return statement, let's go ahead and get our data. And finally, let's go ahead and return our summary card form component that we just added. Now, there's no reason to do a check here because if you take a look in our layout component, we are doing a check initially to see if there's any items found. So in our case here, this is perfectly fine. So back in our front end, now you should see your summaries here. So now for funsies, let's generate another summary. We're going to use this amazing video by Lee Robinson talking about server actions. So in our application, I'm going to paste the URL, click enter, and let's wait for the summary. Let's see if everything works as expected. Nice. Now that we have our summary, there's still one little issue that we're having. If you take a look at our content manager, we are currently not setting the user who created that summary. We want to make sure that we do this on a server, so there's no way someone from our front end to set an ID for something that they're not responsible for. And we're going to accomplish it through Strapi route middleware. You can read more about it in the article that you'll find in the description below. But what is the middleware is a way to control the flow and change the request before moving forward when someone makes a request to your application. So we could learn more about middlewares by going to Strapi's documentation and read more about where and how Strapi middlewares work and how they're implemented. But in our case, we're just going to jump right into it. Taking a look at the post, we're going to use yarn Strapi generate command. Now, the most important part here that you're no longer in the front end folder, but you are in the backend folder. And I'm going to clear because we're making this edit in Strapi application. So I'm going to run yarn Strapi generate. It's going to ask us some follow-up questions. We're going to say we want to create a middleware, and we're going to call it on summary create. And it's going to ask us where we want to add it. We're going to add the middleware to an existing API, which is our summary. Now we're going to open our project in VS Code, and let's pick a nice color here. So if we take a look in our project and we navigate to API summaries, we're going to have this middleware folder with our newly created middleware, which has our basic code here. Let's update it with the code from our article. You could find the complete middleware here in our blog post. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the code inside here. And basically what we're doing when a request is made, we're checking if the user is actually logged into Strapi. If so, we're going to continue. If not, we're going to say you're not authorized. Second, we're going to check if the user has available credits. If the user does not have available credits, we're going to say you don't have enough credits and out of here. Otherwise, we're going to continue. As we continue, we're going to create a new payload, which going to deduct the credits from our Strapi instance, and we're going to connect the user to our summaries collection type. And we're going to pass that payload to our update service using entity service. And you could read more about this in our Strapi documentation, but I just want to show you that we could use middlewares to add additional functionality that we want to happen before submitting a request. So now, before using this middleware, we have to go ahead and edit. So in our API folder under summaries, we're going to go into routes. If you open routes, you're going to see that we have this create core router factory function. So this takes in a object that allows us to pass configuration. And all we're going to do is pass a configuration that's going to say on create, let's use this middleware that we just created. Now let's restart our backend project by running yarn develop. And in a new tab, I'm going to restart the front end by running yarn dev in our front end folder. Refresh. Perfect. Let's try that again. We're going to go ahead, copy, and let's regenerate the summary and see if our middleware is going to work. And look at that. We generated that summary. If we go to our content manager and refresh, and take a look. Oh my goodness, look at this. Our user is being set automatically, which is fantastic. I want to keep a lot of this tutorial focused on Next.js, but we are going to, in the next blog post, cover more topics around Strapi middleware and how we could use it to secure our application. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for that next video, do go check out the middleware customization section in our Strapi documentation to learn more and get the ground rules that you need to know in order to create your middlewares, but don't have to spend too much time about it because next video, we're going to cover this as well. With that being said, thank you for watching. We're making amazing progress and I'll see you in the next video.